Good morning, members. Welcome to the second day of the 66th Wyoming Legislature budget session, Tuesday, February 15th. My last second day. See folks still wandering in, so I think we'll start with our prayer of the day. Invite the Reverend Bob Thompson, First Presbyterian Church. Please join us.
Good morning. Hear these words from Psalm 100. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. Know that the Lord is God. It is he that made us, and we are his. Glorious God of all worlds, we come before you with renewed sense of your calling as representatives of the people of Wyoming, but more importantly, representatives of your kingdom. In your word, you have called us to be your ambassadors, appealing for grace and reconciliation in the world through our lives and through our work. Today, Lord, I lift up these women and men, representatives doing the work you have called them to the citizens of the great state of Wyoming. Almighty God, we are thankful for the women and men who serve in our country's armed forces, for the National Guard, the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Space Force, and the Coast Guard. We are thankful for their bravery and their willingness to serve. We pray that you be with them and give them peace and confidence in their service. Guide them in all they do and protect them from any harm that they may face. We pray especially for service personnel who are recently deployed around the world, especially in the area of Ukraine. Watch over them and protect them. We pray, Lord, for peace in every land where there is conflict. But we pray today for Ukraine. Be with the citizens of Ukraine. May the world leaders involved have wisdom and discernment, and may resolutions be found without violence. Almighty and compassionate God, you are the God of peace, of shalom. You call for justice and equity for the people of this world, and you have called us as your people to support the weak, to help those who suffer, to honor all people. You have commanded us to live in peace by loving you and loving our neighbors. We recall these words from St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow charity. Where there is error, truth. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is sadness, joy. And where there is darkness, let me bring light. Lord of all creation, as you cause the sun to rise, bringing light into darkness, send the light of your Spirit to dawn in our souls and to dispel any darkness. Give us your grace that we may reflect your glory. Let your love show through our deeds, and may your peace shine in our words. I pray all this in Christ's name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend. Appreciate that. And I would note to the body, and actually I had a colleague mention this to me this morning, that there is a new military branch, the Space Force. It's probably the first time I've heard it mentioned on the House floor that I recall. So we're going to have to go through an entire statute book and add Space Force anywhere where there's a mention of all the branches of the military. So somebody get working on that bill draft. Thank you, Reverend. Appreciate it. See you tomorrow. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Convening roll call for the second day, Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Ayer. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson, Jennings, Kinner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washut, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker, we have 60 present.
Thank you. All members are present and accounted for. Appreciate everyone being here. Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 14th, 2022 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Haroldson and Provenza.
Messages from the Senate.
Message 1. Mr. Speaker, the Senate 66th Wyoming State Legislature budget session has now been called to order by President Dan Dockstader and is ready to receive any communications you wish to submit. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 2. Mr. Speaker, newest state employees of the 66th Wyoming State Legislature budget session are as follows. Bobby Frank, floor computer clerk. Debbie Kretschmar, watch person. Cindy Parker, watch person. Faith Shaw, student page. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
All right, members, this morning we're going to honor our military members after their first doing their discussion with the Senate, and they're going to be with us. So we'll be a little bit flexible for when they get here. We may be in the middle of some business, and we'll try to accommodate them as timely as we can. I think Majority Floor Leader, you have a privilege. Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And so, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow we'll take up redistricting the bill. And it's my hope if you have very large amendments, it's not, obviously you're duly elected, you'll bring them whenever you want, but it would be my suggestion if you have very large amendments, for example, you're changing the plan from 62 to 60 to 58 or they're big amendments, please bring them in committee of the whole. So we have 2 other readings to refine edges in case there's impacts we're not aware of or that you're not aware of in your amendments. So obviously there'll probably be some large ones on second reading, but try to bring your big ones on committee of the whole. And that will be tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. That does not mean that we won't potentially have committee of the whole today. It just won't be on the redistricting bill. So we'll see how our business proceeds today, and there may be committee of the whole today. I'll take a personal privilege right now and introduce an organization that's from across our state, the Wyoming Nonprofit Network Board and members, or some of them here if they'd like to stand. They're over here on our South Gallery. And folks, this is 270 organizations, charitable nonprofits across our state working to help our lives, build our communities, arts, education, civic engagement, and recreational opportunities, contribute to over 16,000 employees and $2.2 billion. And these are nonprofit sector folks working to make Wyoming a better place. So please welcome them to the Wyoming House of Representatives. We thank you for being here. We hope you enjoy your time at the Capitol, and thank you for the many partnerships that you have with our local governments and certainly the state of Wyoming and all your work. So thank you and welcome. And no, Ms. Gross, I didn't read the entire thing. It's way too much. Sorry. Members, I'm going to make a couple of announcements. First of all, the Amy Skinner, our NCSL liaison, will be here tomorrow morning to visit about NCSL services. There's lots of information there, and certainly, as you know, we're have a membership to that organization. Also today, CSG West, the Director Ruiz and Jonathan are here. They're going to host a luncheon, and there'll be an announcement from Representative Yin about that later. But they are also here today if you have questions for CSG West. So we're going to, I'm going to make two more announcements. Ladies and gentlemen, there is in the LSO main office, there are two resolutions. One is for Senator Leland Christensen, honoring his service both to our country and to this state, and acknowledging the things that he has done on our behalf. So if you're interested in signing that one, please, it's at the LSO office. And then there was also a gentleman that I think many of you may have seen news articles about, Ryan Passborg, who saved a mother and a child from a burning building in one of our communities. Truly an act of probably incidental heroism, but quite a touching story and quite humbling about what he did. So there's a recounting of that story if you'd like to just add your name to that. And that was at the request of Representative Baker. And I think it's fitting that we acknowledge sometimes things happen and people are in a place and a time and it's a miracle, probably a miracle for that mother and child. So both of those recognitions are in the LSO main office. So please make your way down there and get them signed in the next, this week. That would be helpful so we can get them taken out. And we actually may try to get Mr. Passboard to Cheyenne if he has some availability to recognize him for that act of heroism. So thank you for that. Committee reports.
House Bill 42, sponsored by Appropriations, Local Government Distributions, an act relating to local government funding. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 42, Local Government Distributions. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson-Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 59, sponsored by Appropriations, Workers' Compensation, COVID-19, an act relating to workers' compensation. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 59, Workers' Compensation, COVID-19, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson-Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 78, sponsored by Appropriations, bid rejection or denial for public works contracting, an act relating to public works. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 78, bid rejection or denial for public works contracting. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson-Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 21, sponsored by Revenue, repealing exemption for one-way pagers, an act relating to the sales tax exemptions. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3, Revenue, to whom was referred House Bill 21, repealing exemptions for one-way pagers. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Hallinan, Harshman, Henderson, Jennings, Roscoe, Sweeney, Yin. Noes, Representative Gray. Representative Harshman, Chairman. House Bill 100, sponsored by corporations, redistricting of the legislature, an act relating to the state legislative districts. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 100, redistricting of the legislature, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Brown, Connolly, Nyman, Newsom, Obermuller, Paxton, Summers. Excused, Representative Harshman. Representative Paxton, Chairman.
All right, members, I'm trying to coordinate our time so that we're punctual when the military folks get here. So what we're going to do is a little different than we did yesterday. The yellow sheet you have before you is the consent list. And what I'm going to do, instead of the majority floor leader making a motion, I'm just going to ask for anybody that wants to remove a bill, and then we go through that removing bill. I'm just going to ask anybody that wants to remove a bill from this list. We're just going to pull it off. So when we go to the floor, you'll still have another opportunity to pull the bills off, but it'll take care of that part, most of that, I hope, procedural stuff. And then those bills are just going to drop right to the bottom of the introductions, and we will continue with introductions of committee bills today. First, we'll take up the bills that were pulled off yesterday, and then we'll take up the bills that are pulled off today. I want to be clear, just because a bill was pulled off, if a committee chairman or as you as individuals, and you're the prime sponsor or something, you don't even want it considered, you can actually say, pass on my bill. It's not it's not often that happens, but there is a way. If you just, committee chairman says, hey, there's too many challenges with this bill, we just don't have the time, or however you want to approach that. But so right now I'm going to entertain just requests to remove bills. There's not a motion on the floor, but I'm just going to take these as requests to remove bills so we can get some of that out of the way, and the chief clerk isn't calling all these names. We'll still call the rest of the bills. So Representative Duncan, a bill to remove from the consent.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to remove House Bill 35.
House Bill 35 will be removed, will be not during the motion. Representative Baer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remove House Bill 52 from the consent list.
52 is removed from the consent list. Any other members like to remove a bill from the consent list? Representative Stiver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 56.
House Bill 56 is removed from the consent list. Representative Simpson.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remove House Bill 23 from the consent list, please.
House Bill 23 is removed. Representative Larson, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 31.
House Bill 31. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 28.
28. Representative Hallinan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would remove House Bill number 93.
93 is removed from the consent list, from the proposed consent list. Any other bills? Representative Provenza. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remove House Bill 11 from the consent list.
House Bill 11 is removed. Representative Stiver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 49, not 56. I'm sorry. I apologize.
So there's 49. It was a misspeaking. 49 is removed. 56 is back on unless somebody else wants it removed. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick question. Did you say that we're going to get 2 rounds at this to remove stuff? This is just the first round?
Well, you can certainly remove things when the majority floor leader puts forth the motion. There'll still be a vote on every individual bill, just like there was yesterday. I'm just trying to expedite going through that process while we're waiting on the military department, which they're just arriving. So do you have something you'd like to remove, Representative Gregg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remove 79 and 87.
79 and 87 removed. All right, so there will still be another opportunity as you're considering what you may want to do, but the consent list right now consists of 5, 6, 9, 10, 13, 16, 17, 24, 34, 37, 56, 60, 73, and 86. If I made any mistakes, certainly let me know. You'll have another opportunity when the majority floor leader makes a motion for the consent list. And part of the reason I did that, ladies and gentlemen, is so the chief clerk and I can have the introductions correct and then the committee assignments correct, because she goes in a certain order and I go in a different order, and sometimes we got to sort things out. So those bills, she'll remove those from the consent list, and that'll help us give her some time. So fellow representatives at the 66th, we are honored to have Wyoming's Adjutant General, Major General Greg Porter, and Command Chief Master Sergeant Josh Moore, Wyoming's senior enlisted leader, with us here today to recognize several military members who proudly serve as our sword and shield. As the sword, Wyoming airmen and soldiers answer the nation's call. They mobilize and deploy all over the world as members of the armed forces. As the shield, they respond here at home, ready to tackle floods, fires, and all things in between. We welcome these brave men and women to the House and thank them for their services. General, we welcome you. We welcome the folks that you've brought with you. We honor you, and please recognize, say a few words and recognize those folks you'd like to this day. General Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members of the People's House, for allowing us to be here today. My name is Major General Greg Porter, and I have Chief Command Sergeant Josh Moore with us today. And just thank you very. Please have a seat if you like. You're making me nervous now. Hey, thanks for the opportunity for us to talk about really one of our favorite subjects today, and that's the men and women who represent the Wyoming National Guard and the Wyoming Military Department. I am privileged to represent more than 3,000 of these men and women as they serve the state of Wyoming and our nation. You know, Governor Gordon mentioned yesterday, and the speaker also mentioned too, that I refer to our force as the sword and the shield. And that's true, but I can tell you that it's really on the reason I do that is from some guidance that our Commander-in-Chief, Governor Mark Gordon, gave me. And there's lots of great things that the Wyoming Military Department does and can do. But there's three things that you got to do right. You got to take care of your people. You got to be able to fight and win our nation's wars, and you got to be able to respond here in the homeland. Of all the other things we have to do, you can do as well as you can on that, but not those three things. Those three things you got to get right. So when we talk about the sword and shield, I'm pretty intentional when I talk about the sword, and I couple the word with the sword with lethality. We must be lethal when we're fighting our nation's wars. The National Guard as a whole is the primary combat reserve for both the Army and the Air Force. If diplomacy fails, the Wyoming National Guard must be capable of rapidly deploying, fighting, and most importantly, winning in large-scale ground and air combat operations. The U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan marked the end of America's longest running war. The next war, the one we must be prepared to train our guardsmen to face, will likely be different. It is marked by almost constant competition with our peer and near peer adversaries. All of us can see that the world is no safe place, with Russia poised on the border of Ukraine, with China competing with us and our allies in virtually every space, whether it's land, sea, air, space, or the cyber realm. If it comes to a fight, we must win. When I say we must win, it's not like when the Olympics, when we come down the hill and the silver medalist comes in 400ths of a second behind him. We can't afford that close of a win. We have to be dominant. We have to be overwhelming. We have to leave our adversaries in the starting gate. Because if we don't win that way, too many of our people don't come home. Today, though, I want to focus about the shield in this chamber. As most of you know, the National Guard across this United States has had significant role this past year, and your Wyoming Guard was no different. Our Air Guard fought fires in the West this past year, second busiest firefighting season they've ever had. I don't suspect that the upcoming year is going to be much less different. Both of our Wyoming Air Guard and our Army Guard deployed to both Operation Capital responses. And I tell you, here in the state of Wyoming, your Guard, along with our colleagues in the Department of Health, led by Interim Director Stephen Johansson, and our Wyoming Office of Homeland Security, led by Director Lynn Budd, we also had missions to perform. We executed Operation Patch Adams, and the intent behind Patch Adams was to provide some additional support to our communities who frankly have been flat worn out from fighting COVID for the last couple of years. More than 100 Wyoming Guardsmen and women stepped up to assist 26 medical facilities in 18 Wyoming communities. The men and women assigned to this mission have laundered more than 247,000 pounds of bedding, cleaned 22,000 hospital rooms, delivered 70,000 meals, facilitated 64,000 health screenings, and jumped in wherever and whenever they've been asked to. Today, Chief and I brought 4 Wyoming airmen and soldiers who are serving the community in this manner. Please stand when I call your name. Sergeant Sean O'Grady, Specialist Royce Madden, Staff Sergeant Andrew Bites, and Airman Bradley Hammond have all been working at the Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. Initially, I was a little concerned about the tasks that our soldiers and airmen were going to be performing. As I talk about the lethality and what it means for us to be lethal, I wasn't sure maybe this was something our folks ought to do. But I tell you, I don't have that concern any longer. Our hospitals have been nothing but grateful. They've treated our soldiers and airmen with dignity and respect. And as I talk to those individuals who performed Patch Adams, they couldn't be prouder of the work that they've done. They really do enjoy making a difference and helping their communities. And that's why they do what they do. Following our withdrawal from Afghanistan, the United States brought thousands of our at-risk Afghan allies back to the homeland in Operation Allies Welcome. The DoD component of that was called Operation Allies Refuge. The Wyoming Air National Guard deployed 13 airmen to support that effort, and we brought 2 of them with us here today. Let me introduce Senior Master Sergeant Jennifer Ballinger and Technical Sergeant Shiloh Vallow. These two, hey, these two have a pretty incredible story I'm going to tell you now. You know, they deployed to McGuire back in September. And within a couple of weeks of them being there, they were just on a normal shift. Happened to be walking by, and an Afghani father came up to him and said, "Hey, listen, my wife's going into labor," or tried to do that. Obviously, he doesn't speak English very well, so they're trying to get this across to our two airmen. With only male doctors on duty, the laboring pregnant woman wanted the support of a female. Even though these 2 airmen had no formal medical training and serve in administrative roles in the Air National Guard, they are both moms. Like we have come to expect from our Wyoming Guardsmen, they were quick to react. Despite a language barrier, Sergeants Ballinger and Vallow knew exactly what to do and ensured the safe delivery of a baby girl. Yeah, if I call that right, it was in the bathroom that you delivered this baby girl. So it wasn't like it was a really cool place to have a child. You can see, Mr. Speaker, why this is our favorite subject. We have some incredible people. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. You have many difficult tasks ahead of you, from budget to redistricting, what to do with our ARPA monies, much needed raises for our state employees, and the myriads of bills and legislative discussion we'll each have in the days to come. It is a testament to your support, to our guard, that you allowed us this time to speak with you today. I think there are many similarities between Wyoming Guardsmen and Wyoming legislators. Each of us represents Wyoming. We both have ranchers, bankers, miners, doctors, lawyers, students, grocery store workers within our ranks. We each have moms, dads, sisters, brothers, grandfathers, grandmothers. We each take away time from our jobs, family, church, hobbies in the pursuit of our own personal interests to serve the people of Wyoming in the best way that we know how. I've spoken to you today of the sword and shield. Let me close with our motto, Ride for the Brand. Each of you well know what this means because this body adopted the Code of the West back in 2010. In the Wyoming National Guard, when we end a meeting, we stand, we salute, and we say, Ride for the Brand. This reminds us all that we serve something greater than ourselves. Cowboy Teddy Blue Abbott said this about the brand in his recollections. They were intensely loyal to the outfit they were working for and would fight to the death for it. They would follow their wagon boss through hell and never complain. On behalf of the men and women who make up the Wyoming Military Department, thank you for all that you sacrifice in your service to Wyoming. Bless our veterans, bless our families, bless all those who serve the sword and shield. Ride for the brand.
Thank you. General Porter. General Porter, Chief Moore, we thank you for joining us, for sharing the fine example we have of our Guard with us here today. We thank you for their service. Thank all the members of the service. Thank you for mentioning the veterans that have previously served. Ladies and gentlemen, we have this little tradition. We'll send one of you down one aisle, one of you down. But you're not getting the kudos for yourself. You're taking them and the greetings for the men and women upstairs and the men and women all over Wyoming that served our state and our nation. Thank you, sir. Thank you, members. We'll stand at ease just a moment. The Chief Clerk had to retrieve something, but we'll just stand at ease just a moment. Oh, I got it.
Double check those numbers.
Here.
Yeah, but I want to have the right numbers.
All right, members, we're going to continue with our business. We're going to Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 13-5, I move the consent list consisting of the following House bills. House Bill 5, 6, 9, 10, 13, 16, 17, 24, 34, 37, 56, 60, 73, and 86.
Would any member like any bill removed from the consent list? Would any member like any of the bills just read off the majority floor removed from the consent list? Third time, any member like a bill removed? So members, as you recall, there'll be a roll call for the consent list. The tradition is you vote aye, and then the chief clerk walks back through the bills and you can change your vote on each individual bill. Chief Clerk? Oh, reading of the bills. Follow the script. Reading of the bills.
House Bill 5, sponsored by Agriculture. Wild Horse and Bureau Management. House Bill 6, sponsored by Select Water. ARPA funds for water and wastewater projects. House Bill 9, sponsored by Select Tribal. Economic Development Programs, Tribal Inclusion. House Bill 10, sponsored by Select Tribal. Tribal Reference Amendments. House Bill 13, sponsored by Transportation. Off-road recreational vehicle operation. House Bill 16, sponsored by Transportation. Military Assistance Trust Fund, authorized users. House Bill 17, sponsored by Transportation. Veterans Facilities surrounded by grazing. House Bill 24, sponsored by Agriculture. Wild Horse and Bureau Management 2. House Bill 34, sponsored by School Facilities. State funds, investments, and distributions. House Bill 37, sponsored by Judiciary. Juvenile Justice, Data Reporting. House Bill 56, sponsored by Management Audit. Examination of books of certain districts and entities. House Bill 60, sponsored by Management Audit. Fiscal Training and Enforcement of Financial Reporting Laws. House Bill 73, sponsored by Select Water. Omnibus Bill, Water Bill Planning. House Bill 86, sponsored by Blockchain. Genetic Data Privacy Amendments.
Members, we're voting on the consent list. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Roll call on the consent list, the introduction consent list. Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Ayer, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stiff, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter. Aye. Yin, Zawanitzer, Mr. Speaker. 60 aye. And as for House Bill 5, are there any changes? Blackburn? Blackburn? Flitner? Aye to no. Schwartz? Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 58 aye, 2 no. It's on 5. Okay. As for House Bill 6, are there any changes? Gray? Aye to no. Stivar? Aye to no. Bear? Aye to no. Burt? Aye to no. Fortner? Aye to no. Winter? Aye to no. Wharf? Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 53 aye, 7 no. As for House Bill 9, are there any changes? Jennings, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 59 aye, 1 no. As for House Bill 10, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye. As for House Bill 13, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Western, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 59 aye, 1 no. As for House Bill 16, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye. As for House Bill 17, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye. As for House Bill 24, are there any changes? Schwartz, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 59 aye, 1 no. As for House Bill 34, are there any changes? Gray, aye to no. Larson Dan, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Western, aye to no. Baker, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Rodriguez Williams, aye to no. Wharf, aye to no. Blackburn, aye to no. Haroldson, aye to no. Nyman, aye to no. Andrew, aye to no. Hallinan, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 41 aye, 19 no. As for House Bill 37, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye. As for House Bill 56, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye. As for House Bill 60, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 60 aye. As for House Bill 73, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye. And as for House Bill 86, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. The following bills having received a required approval of 2/3 of elected members, I'm referring committee House Bill number 5 to committee number 5, Agriculture. House Bill number 6 to committee number 2, Appropriations. House Bill number 9 to committee number 9, Minerals. House Bill number 10 to Judiciary, committee number 1, Judiciary. House Bill 13 to committee number 8, Transportation. House Bill 16 to committee number 8, Transportation. House Bill 17, committee number 8, Transportation. House Bill 24, committee number 5, Agricultural. House Bill 34, committee number 2, Appropriations. House Bill 37, committee number 1, Judiciary. House Bill 56, committee number 7, Corporations. House Bill 60, committee number 7, Corporations. House Bill 73, committee number 5, Agricultural. House Bill number 86 to committee number 1, Judiciary. All right, so members, we're going to continue with introductory votes. These are the votes of on the bills that were pulled from the consent list yesterday. I'm going to read off the bills. I've had one request for a bill to be removed. I'll make a mention of that, and at least the reason that the chairman gave me for that. And so the bills, and we're just going to do them in numerical order today because I think that's just the easiest. So if you are one of the chairman or the designated member of that committee, and you're going to do the introductory presentation, introduction, please be ready with your presentation, and then and then there'll be a response, and then a second response. So the bills that we're going to take up are in this order: House Bill number 8, House Bill 18, House Bill 29, House Bill 32, House Bill 36, House Bill 47, House Bill 80. Chairman of Transportation asked me to remove House Bill 12 because it's being taken care of elsewhere and unnecessary at this time. So again, I'm just going to give you the first three: number 8, number 18, number 29. So we're at that order of business of introduction, reading, and reference of bills. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 8. Reading clerk, please read the bill.
House Bill 8, sponsored by Travel, scratch tickets, outdoor recreation funding.
We have the chairman of the committee, Chairman Flitner. Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move House Bill 8, and I ask for the committee's favorable opinion. And for an introduction of the bill, I hand it off to my good vice chairman.
Representative Newsom, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 8 provides for the long-term sustainable funding of the Office of Outdoor Recreation. It does this by allowing for scratch tickets to be added to the portfolio of games that are already allowed to be sold by the Wyoming Lottery. The cities, towns, and counties would still get the proceeds from the sale of traditional lottery tickets. Only scratch ticket sales would benefit recreation throughout the state. We all know that outdoor recreation is important to our citizens and our visitors. The challenge becomes building and maintaining the infrastructure that is essential to the outdoor experience. All over the state, outdoor collaboratives have been formed. These grassroots organizations are in the process of identifying projects that need to be done, but lacked funding to complete them. Just a couple miles outside of my town of Cody, there is a Cedar Mountain. It's easily accessible just a few miles from town and has great hiking and climbing. It sits on land that is owned by the BLM, by the Bureau of Reclamation, and as well as private land. At this time, there is no infrastructure or management of this recreation area. Last summer, an estimated 22,000 people used this recreation area. Unfortunately, there are no toilets or trash cans. This makes for a real problem with human waste and trash. The Park County Outdoor Collaborative is planning to add the necessary amenities to make this area more user-friendly, but they need funding. With a grant from the Outdoor Recreation Office, they would be happy to contribute many hours of volunteer time as well as expertise to complete the project. There are similar projects being identified throughout communities throughout Wyoming. Please consider providing long-term sustainable funding for the Office of Outdoor Recreation by allowing scratch tickets to be added to the games offered by the Wyoming Lottery. Thank you.
Exactly 2 minutes. Exactly. I had the hammer. She pulled it off. So members, anybody like to speak in opposition is allowed. There's 1 minute allowed for opposition. Anybody like to speak in opposition? Anybody like to speak in opposition? If you want to speak in opposition, be at the mic because you're wasting time for introductions, folks. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I would just speak against this. I believe that we are at a place in the state where we have continued to increase and add into our gaming sector quite a bit of different aspects. And I believe a scratch-off ticket would be another way that we would pull money out of an already depleted economy. And I just don't see it as something we need to do. Do I agree that we need to work for outdoor recreation funding? I believe that is the case. We did hear there's a lot of sectors of that, like mountain biking and stuff, that have not at all helped with the funding of outdoor recreation. Majority of our outdoor recreation funding comes through hunting and fishing, as well as motorized vehicles. So I believe there's options for outdoor recreation funding that would not require us to add another form of gaming in our state. So I would ask that we do not add another form of gaming at this point.
Thank you. Anybody like to have the remaining 5 seconds? Representative Newsom, you have 30 seconds if you'd like to respond to anything.
Thank you. Outdoor recreation is so important to our economy. And as we talk about diversification of our economy, we need to look at the ways to fund outdoor recreation, as it is so important to not only our citizens, but also to our visitors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chief Clerk, please call the roll. Reminder, folks, it's an introductory vote in a budget session, 2/3 vote to accept this for introduction. Chief Clerk.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washut. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker, Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 32 aye, 28 no.
House Bill 8, having not received a 2/3 vote, House Bill 8 is indefinitely postponed. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 18.
House Bill 18, sponsored by Transportation.
First reading of the bill.
Off-road recreational vehicle registration amendments.
Sponsor is Chairman from the Transportation Committee, Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 18 for introduction and turn the explanation over to the good representative from the capital city.
Representative Henderson, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask you to consider this bill favorably because a year ago we put in an update to the statute, and we inadvertently changed it to if you own an off-road vehicle, then we don't have to register it until you change ownership, and that's a loss to revenue. Of course, that revenue is needed for our off-road purposes and also other good purposes. So this fixes that. This requires the registration to be done on an annual basis. That's the basis of this bill. Any questions?
Thank you. Any member want to speak in opposition to the bill? Any member in opposition? Any member in opposition? Again, folks, if you want to speak in opposition, please be at the mic and ready to go. Seeing none, seeing no further discussion, Chief Clerk, please call the roll on introduction of House Bill 18.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washut, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Blackburn, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 54 aye, 6 no.
House Bill 18, having received the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the members, House Bill 18 is received for introduction, is passed introduction. House Bill 18 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. Next bill for consideration is House Bill 29. Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House.
Just a moment. We got to read in the bill. Sorry. Okay. Follow the script, Barlow.
House Bill 29, sponsored by Education. Hathaway Scholarship Amendments.
All right, now we're ready.
All right.
Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 29, Hathaway Scholarship Amendments. And ask for your favorable consideration. Turn the explanation over to a Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Majority Floor Leader Summers, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the 66, I bring you House Bill 29, Hathaway Scholarship Amendments, and ask for your favorable consideration. Mr. Speaker, your Education Committee took up the interim topic of the Hathaway Scholarship, and House Bill 29 is the recommended amendments. House Bill 29 allows working students to take less than 6 hours per semester and still remain eligible for the Hathaway. The bill modernizes the expenditure and reserve account by merging them, by allowing investment in Pool A and by fixing a timing issue with payout of the Hathaway. Members, I forwarded you an email at about 8:58 from one of our LSO staff that explains the changes in the accounts and the spending policy. And Mr. Speaker, the Hathaway corpus has been growing, and House Bill 29 provides a slight increase in the Hathaway scholarship amounts. And Mr. Speaker, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Majority Floor. Anybody want to speak against this? If you're at the mic, we'll take those comments. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to get clarity, and to be clear, this time is also allotted for questions. My memory is that we just increased this probably 2 years ago, maybe 1 year ago. I just want to understand what the percentage was last time and when that occurred.
Any other member in opposition? Members, truly, you're taking your own time away from more introductions if you're not at the mic. Please proceed, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm against the bill in opposition. I'm worried about the fund there. It isn't listed, so I'd caution that. Is it 50 million? Is it 20 million? So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other member in opposition? Member in opposition? All right, any other member in opposition? Anybody like to close this? Close it. Doesn't have to be the same person. Chairman Harshman, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, if you'd open your email, the Hathaway flow chart has 700 million in the corpus. And this is a good question by the representative from Powell. It'll move that 4.5%, which is 26 million, to roughly 50 million. And we go from two accounts, an expenditure and a reserve, to just a reserve account. And then we can invest it in pool A and make more money. The bottom line is July 1st, it all sweeps. And then they have to pay scholarship bills in August, and there's no money in the expenditure account, and we have to flow it back. So it's always this right pocket, left pocket.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And just to be clear, folks, if you want to speak, be at the mic, please. Chief Clerk, please call the roll on introduction of House Bill 29.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washut. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 47 aye, 13 no.
House Bill 29, having received the 2/3 vote of the members of the body, House Bill 29 is introduced and referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 32. Chairman Wilson. Reading clerk, please read the bill.
House Bill 32, sponsored by Labor.
First reading of the bill.
Vaccine requirements, limitations.
Chairman Wilson, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And how nice it is to not have this plastic box around my station back here. I move House Bill 32 and ask for your favorable vote on introduction. Folks, this is the Labor Committee bill addressing vaccines, a topic which I'm sure is of interest to many of your constituents. We've worked on it throughout the entire interim. It uses the existing legal concept of reasonable accommodation, which has been adjudicated and used by HR departments for decades. The bill looks at vaccine passports, visitation in healthcare facilities, employment, and also K-12 vaccination requirements. It's actually, in spite of that breadth of topic, it's very narrowly crafted. It does balance the rights of business owners and employers with the interests of employees and clients. Because the committee voted to sponsor it at every one of our meetings, even after the special session, the bill's language now acknowledges the effect of the Supreme Court decisions. You know, I'm sure we are all very tired of COVID and would like to never hear about it again, but that's what we thought last spring. And we think it would be better if the legislature actually deals with vaccinations and reasonable accommodation broadly now, rather than to continue to have special sessions for the disease of the year, whatever year it is. This bill provides a workable and balanced foundation to look at the issues that have come up, and I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. You did not use your entire 2 minutes, but thank you for that. Madam Minority Floor Leader, and speaking in opposition, anybody else wants to speak in opposition? If the Minority Floor Leader doesn't take the entire minute, please be prepared. Please begin. Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge you to vote no on introduction. This is a bill that we voted down in special session. Some might argue that this bill should be defeated because it is inadequate, like an email that we got this morning. But I'll give you my first 3 reasons why it goes too far and should be defeated. First, the bill now covers all vaccine mandates, think smallpox and polio. It upends decades, if not a century, of well-established doctrine that we as the legislature are responsible for policy regarding public health. Second, this bill is again anti-business. It strips Wyoming businesses from establishing terms and conditions of work to protect their workers, their public, and their bottom line. It again potentially puts our employers at odds with federal doctrine. They have to choose between the feds or the state and the sanctions that follow. And third, this bill has a completely arbitrary 5-year wait period before schools can mandate a proven effective vaccine for anything. Those are my top 3.
Thank you.
But I have more. Thank you. I urge you to vote no.
Anyone want to speak in favor? Anyone else besides this? Okay, Madam Chairman, please proceed. 30 seconds.
You, Mr. Speaker. In fact, we did not vote it down during special session. We voted aye on it in committee and it wasn't heard on the floor. The bill has amended to take into consideration the federal issue. So we are very carefully not putting state businesses in a nutcracker between state and federal. And I think, as a matter of fact, it's our job preferably to plan ahead for future things and not just jump up and down for one disease. That's why it is a broad bill stating legislative concepts. So we don't have to have
Thank you very much.
Sessions.
So members, we are voting on House Bill 32, introduction, requires a 2/3 vote. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stibar, Sweeney, Walters, Washut, Western, Worf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 45 aye, 15 no.
House Bill 32, having received the 2/3 majority, House Bill 32 is introduced and referred to Committee Number 10. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 36. Reading clerk, please read the bill.
House Bill 36, sponsored by Revenue. Severance tax distribution revision.
Chairman Harshman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, if you could open your email, I heard it across several of your computers. It says House Bill 36 severance tax. It's really 3 points to this. It's a short little bill. I'd like to start, I've color coded the email. I'd like to start with the yellow. That statute was put in place nearly 20 years ago, and nobody has followed it. And the good speaker discovered this, and this became a interim topic for your committee number 3. So we looked at all of these, from federal mineral royalties, severance tax, inheritance tax, looked at the severance tax, have a bill draft in front of you to make a slight change, which explain, and that's in the green part. The current recipients, the cap is 155 million for severance tax. Those go to water, highways, city and county road funds, and CapCon. That would not change their dollar amounts one iota. We simply raised the tax from 155 to 200, add school foundation program in there. We're trying to get 45 million bucks to the school foundation to eliminate this paper deficit, so we can quit talking about it. We've taken a lot of these $50 million little chunks the last 4 or 5 years and took what was then a paper deficit of 500 million down to now around 100 million. And so this will cut it in half. And so who are the losers on this? Anything over the cap flows 2/3, 1/3, budget reserve account, general fund. Currently there's $640 million in the budget reserve account. And then additionally in blue, I think it's really important. There's a much more than this 45 million amount of severance derived from school, state, trust lands. Much of this production happens on state, school, trust lands, and not one penny of severance tax goes to the school children. And I just think it's important to kind of recognize that whole fairness. And part of this issue with education is it's the most volatile service
Thank you, Chairman.
Provide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman. Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Would you like to finish any comments, Chairman?
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I probably should. But I just think it's a part of this spreading this revenue base out, because we're like every other state. We pay for K-12 education with property taxes. The issue in Wyoming is not our revenue, it's really our volatility piece. And because over half our property taxes are paid for by minerals. It's assessed at 100%. And so really that's this idea, is to spread this out and diversify a little more. So thank you, members, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So members, we're voting on House Bill 36 for introduction. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker.
Aye.
Closing vote. Are there any changes? Baker. I to know. Duncan, I to know. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 31 aye, 29 no.
House Bill 36, having not received a 2/3 majority, House Bill 36 is indefinitely postponed. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 47. First reading of the bill.
House Bill 47, sponsored by Minerals. Local Impact Assistance Payment.
Chairman Greer.
Mr. Speaker, I move House Bill 47. Ask for your favorable consideration. I'll turn the explanation over to the distinguished gentleman from House District 54.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the House, addressing the impacts of large industrial projects on local resources for expected services provided by government, such as roads, water, and fire, have been challenging. An effort to determine the equity on what should be provided by local government and what additional help should be provided by industry, either through direct assessment, as some states do, or directing enhanced revenue from sales tax generated from a new project back to local government to provide funding to address the impacts of the industry as we do. And prior to 2015, counties in the state were able to look back on sales tax and then collect the increase in taxes. The problem with that was that the funds become available after the impacts had occurred. In 2015, we adopted a formula to allow local governments to collect up to 2.76% of the estimated cost of a project, which would come out of the state's portion of the sales tax collected. This allows the locals to address the impacts ahead of construction. The estimated cost of the project is determined by the Siting Council. Since the implementation of this formula, we've identified some gaps. We find the Industrial Siting Commission wasn't required to provide justification for the amounts of the impact aid approved. They weren't required to consider a distribution ratio of unmitigated impacts when the impacts covered multiple jurisdictions, such as disproportionate impacts on smaller communities or respective counties. We found requests for impacts aid sometimes not being used for the same purpose of which they requested, such as funding for law enforcement, but not hiring any. We also had suggestions from the county commissioners to put the reimbursement on a tiered level, depending on the amount.
Thank you very much. Anyone speaking in opposition? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill with respect for the collaborative work the good representative from the southwest corner of the state has put into it. It is improved since we have seen it last. Currently, Wyoming is the only state that distributes general funds this way, generated from sales and use tax from construction and purchasing back to local communities for unmitigated impacts. Under the current model, however, the bill proposes a decrease in the maximum amount a community can request from 2.76% to less than 2.25%. And here's where the sticking point lies. Without a standard development fee in place for smaller projects, there's just not enough revenue generated to mitigate impacts. Local impact payments help communities pay for infrastructure, fire, EMS, and police services that are stressed due to these large industrial projects. Considering the rising cost of goods and services, now is not the time to hinder our community's abilities to request resources for public safety or provide adequate pay to frontline employees.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Response, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you go back and look at the amount, the numbers of projects that have been used, the percentage of impact assessments required has not been at the 7.2, the 2.76 level. We've adjusted it to accommodate what has been provided. I'd encourage you to support this bill and let us fix the gaps.
Thank you very much. So members were voting on introduction, House Bill 47, 2/3 vote. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Ayer, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washut, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker.
No.
Closing vote. Are there any changes? Provenza, aye to no. Fortner, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 53 aye, 7 no.
House Bill 47, having received the affirmative vote of 2/3 members, House Bill is introduced and referred to committee number 9. Next bill for consideration is House Bill 80. Chairman Zawanitzer. Reading of the bill.
House Bill 80, sponsored by corporations.
First reading of the bill.
Campaign reports amendments.
Chairman Zawanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move House Bill 80 and ask for your favorable consideration, body. This was a short discussion bill that came to us in the interim from our chief election official. There is some concern that we have outside political action committees and what they call super PACs forming, sometimes for Wyoming candidates outside of Wyoming, sometimes more to national level, and money goes through Wyoming, and for a wide variety of legitimately good reasons. But we do have a loophole existing in our law on how we account for that money transfers when it comes through and how it gets spent. So this treats all political action committees in Wyoming, whether you file in Wyoming or you file outside of our state but are spending money in Wyoming, the same. And then the only other portion was in the penalty on there on page 2. The current penalty is $500. We changed that to $500 per day after the final order until the report's filed. The conversation with some of these expenditures are in the 5-digit range or higher. And so more than a $500 fee or penalty is necessary to enforce any type of wrongdoing or enforce transparency and accountability. Would ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Chairman. Anyone speaking in opposition? Speaking in opposition? Speaking in opposition? Seeing none. Further discussion? Seeing none. We're voting on House Bill 80, introduction, 2/3 vote. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washut, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 51 aye, 9 no.
House Bill 80, having received 2/3 vote, House Bill is introduced and referred to committee number 7, corporations. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 11. Actually, members, we've got a cell phone ringing on the floor, so that needs to be dealt with immediately. And there was when I read the bills off earlier, I left one bill off. And so that it was taken off the list yesterday. It got dropped by the chief clerk and I, and it's House Bill 40. So we're going to do House Bill 40 because that's from yesterday's list. So yeah, we got to get the chief clerk organized here, follow the script. And then I'm going to give you the bills we're going to do after that were withdrawn from the list today. And we're going to start with so it'll be House Bill 40, and then it'll be House Bill 11, 23, 28, 31, 35, 49, 52, 79. I'll do it again. So next will be House Bill 40. The chief clerk has to gather that bill. I apologize. It was inadvertently dropped from the list. Then it'll be House Bill 11, House Bill 23, House Bill 28, House Bill 31, House Bill 35, House Bill 49, House Bill 52, House Bill 79. And again, members, these are all committee bills. They were all removed from the consent list this morning. I think it's in order we just keep working. The bills are before us. First reading of the bill.
House Bill 40, sponsored by Judiciary.
First reading of the bill.
Judges Housing Allowance.
Thank you. House Bill 40. Chairman Olson, please proceed. Introduction vote. Introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 40 and do ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, I bring you on behalf of the Joint Judiciary Committee, House Bill 40, Judicial Housing Allowance. And just real quick, you listened to the State of the Judiciary yesterday and heard the long list of judicial appointments. And our Judicial Nominating Commission has been very busy filling those appointments through retirement. And then as judges move up, there's a lot of work there. And this bill is brought to us in conjunction with those efforts that are occurring as we see the need to fill judges. The third branch of government is looking strongly at particular areas of the state where it's just not affordable for good judges. And so applications don't look as good as maybe they could, or the fear is that they may not look as good in the future as they could. All this is simply a may option. Lets the third branch of government include housing within its salary for judges in certain areas. It will create its own rules on what that looks like in terms of the formula, consistent with what we do in the executive branch through certain agencies that allow for housing allowances inside of your compensation. Comes out of their own budget, again, your third branch of government, and it can't affect sitting justices or judges pursuant to the Constitution. So really pretty straightforward, and it's really brought to you by that other branch who's searching for some solutions with some issues that they're seeing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Anyone want to speak in opposition? Speaking in opposition. I'm going to start your time immediately from now on. Members, if you're not at the mic, I'm starting the time as soon as
That's okay.
Representative Gray, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just speak in opposition. I appreciate the work of the judiciary, but the raises that occurred a few years ago, it was really the first one to move. And I just don't, I think about the equity of the way this is worded. I think that it's just unequitable. And what I want to understand is, why should this be different than any other state employee? I'm concerned about that, and I'm going to be voting no. Thank you.
Any other member in opposition? Member in opposition, Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also would speak against this. As we see in other facets of government and school, anytime that the government goes into housing, there's a lot that comes along with that. There's real estate, there's maintenance.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Olson, or someone wants to speak? And yeah, you have 30 seconds. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First and foremost, the executive branch actually already does this for your fishing game and school districts, so it's not judicial alone. Secondly, they're not getting into the housing market. They're allowing housing, it would be a housing stipend as part of your compensation. And third, talk to your local judges. Folks, if you talk to your judges, I think you'll get a very straightforward answer on the necessity of this in certain areas of the state. So make it local, talk to your folks. This is a good bill. And
Thank
the
you,
branch
Chairman.
really needs it.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chairman.
Speaker.
All right, members, we're voting on House Bill 40. Requires a 2/3 vote. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kinner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stibar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer, Mr. Speaker, Duncan. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 37 aye, 23 no.
House Bill 40, having failed to receive a 2/3 vote, House Bill 40 is indefinitely postponed. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 11. Reading clerk.
House Bill 11, sponsored by Select Tribal.
First reading of the bill.
Livestock, infectious disease control, tribal inclusion.
Chairman, Vice Chairman, I guess it's Chairman of Select Tribal, excuse me, Chairman Larson.
Mr. Speaker, I move House Bill 11 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, currently, the state is not able to allow livestock producers who live within the confines of the Wind River Reservation to participate in brucellosis reimbursement programs. The state veterinarian came to us and asked if we could amend or do something to correct that. And so what this bill does is put in provision where livestock producers who agree to comply with the state statutes can then participate in the programs of reimbursement and testing and whatnot for brucellosis like the rest of the state does. It does not put any requirements on tribal, on the tribes to test wildlife, to verify anything else, but it just broadens the ability for them to participate in these programs that they couldn't because of the statute restrictions. I'd encourage you to vote for it.
Thank you. In opposition, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In conversations I've had with folks on the ground that have brought bison to the reservation, their concern is that introducing the language of brucellosis and bison into the bill is a threat to their buffalo programs, which is an issue that's already been mitigated because the bison have to be tested before they come in for brucellosis and other disease. And so the concern is that this might pose a threat to those programs in making sure that we have bison on the Wind River Reservation.
Any other opposition? Opposition? Opposition. Seeing none. Chairman Larson, 30 seconds.
Would just remind the body that this is a voluntary effort by those producers on the reservation, regardless of what type of livestock they're producing, whether it be buffalo, bison, or any other type of livestock. So should not impede that matter. Time's up.
Thank you very much. The members are voting on introduction. House Bill 11. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Burt, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 57 aye, 3 no.
House Bill 11, having received the 2/3 vote, House Bill 11 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 23. First reading, clerk.
House Bill 23, sponsored by Revenue.
First reading of the bill.
Agriculture, Land, Qualifications, Annual Gross Revenues.
Thank you very much. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a committee bill we worked on, and I think interestingly enough has support of our number 3 industry in the state, the ag community. And what we learned really the history of this when this ag exemption really to qualify for the ag property rate many decades ago was the idea was to set it around $5,000 to $10,000. And then in the legislative process, when the bill came through, somebody in an amendment dropped it to $500. Really the 2 largest ag industry representatives, one wanted 10, one wanted 5 really in our committee meetings. And so this bill would raise that gross revenue from a mere $500 to $5,000. And it's a tough bill. I mean, it just is. But so the idea is to really work on this issue of these hobby ranches who, who have some pretty nice places, many of them, and can easily qualify then by just doing a simple rent, a little bit of their land, or, a small amount of gross revenue. So 1 cow, 1 horse, whatever. And so that's really what we're trying to do. It's not an easy bill. And so I bring it for your consideration. Committee worked at it. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members in opposition, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this bill harms the small agricultural landowners. If you look at the fiscal note, you'll see the benefit to the state is really minor. But the damage to those individual agricultural users is significantly greater. I would submit to you the benefit is not worth the damage. I encourage you to vote no on the introductory vote.
Representative Jennings, there's some time remaining.
I'd also urge a no vote on this. The thing that I think that needs to be focused on here is that there are niche farms that 100 years ago, when this statute was brought in, there's not the same thing as it is today.
Any other member in opposition? Please proceed, Representative Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am opposed to this bill as well. And I think before this thing goes any further, somebody's got to identify what their what ag land actually is. And
thank
to
you
my
very
knowledge,
much.
that has not been done.
Thank you very much. Anyone want to speak for the bill? 30 seconds for the bill. 30 seconds for the bill. Seeing Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, speaking in support of the bill, just inflation in the decades that have gone on, this bill is necessary. I mean, in the ebb and flow, the numbers could change, but an increase is definitely in order.
Thank you very much. So members are voting on House Bill 23, introduction. 2/3 vote. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Ayer, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yen, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Wharf. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 34 aye, 25 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 23, having not received a 2/3 vote, House Bill 23 is indefinitely postponed. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 28. Reading clerk.
House Bill 28, sponsored by Education.
First reading of the bill.
Hathaway lump sum merit scholarship.
Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 28, Hathaway lump sum scholarship for introduction. Ask for your favorable consideration. Turn the explanation over to the member from House District 13.
Madam Minority Floor Leader, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Friends, this is one of the bills that we considered on education for the past couple of years because we have a need to increase post-secondary educational attainment. What this bill does is it makes it less burdensome for students to use their Hathaway scholarships to get everything from a high quality certificate like a CDL to an associate or bachelor's degree. Right now, there's a problem with the rules and administration of the Hathaway post-high school. It works great for kids with honors and who just start college and finish in 4 years. It doesn't work so great for students who drop out and want to return, or for those on the lower end of the eligibility who only get a couple $100s per semester. So the solution that this bill proposes is to turn the Hathaway award that a student earned in high school into a lump sum payment that the student can draw down from for educational expenses over a period not to exceed 20 years. It doesn't change the amount of the award at all. I'll give you an example. An average student, a kid with an average GPA and ACT will earn a Hathaway Opportunity Scholarship. It's about $6,700. Right now, that award can only be used in $840 increments over 4 years for each semester. A kid who wants to get a CDL and in a community college, that's somewhat worthless. This allows that kid to draw down their entire Hathaway in order to get that certificate and move on. This bill also repeals continuing eligibility requirements while in college, thus reducing administrative burden. Unlike now, it allows a student to come back to school if he or she drops out and have available what's left of their Hathaway pot. This bill could be a game changer and make a real difference in increasing the opportunity for our students to
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Speaking in opposition, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question. Did the committee discuss the impact of inflation on potentially setting up an account like this and how that might impact our plan and goal? Thank you.
Any other member in opposition? Representative Stiver, you've got a few seconds.
Thank you. You got to remember 2019, we passed the Wyoming Works Bill that's supposed to take care of this for non-traditional students against the bill.
Representative Heiner, a few seconds left.
All at once. I raised 7 children and I know what it's like to give money lump sum all at once. It's not a good deal. It doesn't turn out well. Although the intent of this is very good, I believe we need to be careful about giving a lump sum to a 18-year-old.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. 30 seconds, Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inflation is addressed in another bill, as well as the Wyoming Works program in the Wyoming Tomorrow's bill that you'll hear about in just a second. You know what? In all honesty, sure, there are going to be some kids that mess around with their money. They do it now. But this allows the kid who wants to get that certificate to be able to get it. It also allows, for example, a kid who has dropped out of school in order to be a parent to come back 5 years later. And
thank you very much. We've got the controls of the mic up here. So members, we're voting on House Bill 28, 2/3 vote. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kinner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Orff, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Larson Lloyd, aye to no. Brown, aye to no. Further changes? Oakley, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 29 aye, 31 no.
Members, House Bill 28, having not received a 2/3 vote, it is indefinitely postponed. Members, looking at the time and we have committee meetings meeting at noon. It takes us about 7 to 8 minutes to get through a bill. So I think by the time we get closed up, we're going to make our committees go a little long or be short time. So Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Committee announcements. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, this isn't a committee announcement, but
Privilege of the floor. Please
privilege
proceed.
of the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So CSG West is here. The executive director and a staff member is here to talk about the Western Legislative Academy. Many of your colleagues and coworkers here have attended, and I think many of them can speak very well. I don't think any of them had a bad time. So it's a really excellent program. It teaches you how to be a better legislator to create a better legislature. And so if you have any questions, they're offering lunch until 1 p.m. Down in W108, just one floor down. So thank you. And I hope everyone that is eligible, if you are eligible, if you're within the first 4 years of your term, goes to ask questions and also apply. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Chairman Burkhart.
Committee announcements, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, transportation, will meet 15 minutes afternoon recess to consider House Bill 53 and House Bill 7.
Thank you. Chairman Flitner.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Your House TRW committee number 6 will be meeting within the next 10 to 15 minutes to discuss House Bill 43.
Any other announcements? Any other announcements? Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Appropriations will meet on adjournment to hear House Bill 6 and House Bill 79 if we get to it this afternoon.
Chairman Olson.
Mr. Speaker, your House Committee 1 Judiciary will meet 15 minutes after adjournment, grab some lunch, members, and then we will hear House Bill 39 pre-application determinations for licensing and House Bill 70 digital identity protection in the connector hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Further announcements? Further announcements? All right, members, remember that a lot of you are going to committee, and all those other members, there are lunches being provided to us by sponsors. Take advantage of those. Obviously, if you're in a committee, be respectful that when people are testifying. Members, as you know, I have asked, and we are going to take up an issue at 2 o'clock when we reconvene. We will reconvene promptly at 2 o'clock. And after that, we'll potentially continue with introductions, but we also go to committee of the whole. We have bills read in. So I also ask members that if you have a motion that you're planning to bring to the floor, that you have that provided to the chief clerk so it can be inputted into the journal and into the roll call system. So thank you, members. Members, we stand in recess until 2 p.m.